Welcome to Strip Cover Lit, where we squeeze the bigger picture out of literature. I'm Adrian Fort, and we are here for a poetry discussion. A poetry discussion that will take place in two separate playlists here on the channel. The first, obviously, being the poetry discussion playlist, but the second being a playlist which is to celebrate National Poetry Month 2021, April 2021, during which I will be doing a poetry discussion every day of the month. Now, I do this every time. I leave my book on the floor beside me, and I have to reference it. During the month here, Mondays are for Langston Hughes, Tuesdays are for Sylvia Plath, Wednesdays are for Charles Bukowski, Thursdays for Emily Dickinson, Friday is for Charles Bukowski again, and Saturday is for Robert Frost. But Sundays here today, Sundays are a sort of placeholder for any poem that I just sort of want to discuss. And today is one of those poems that comes to us from Charles Simic. It is known as Begotten of the Spleen, and it reads as such. The Virgin Mother walked barefoot among the landmines. She carried an old man in her arms like a howling babe. The earth was an old people's home. Judas was the night nurse emptying bedpans into the River Jordan, tying people on a dog chain. The old man had stumps for legs. St. Peter came pushing a cart loaded with flying carpets. They were not flying carpets. They were piles of bloody diapers. The Magi stood around cleaning their nails with bayonets. The old man gave little Mary Magdalene a broken piece of mirror. She hid in the church outhouse. When she got thirsty, she licked the steam off the glass. That leaves Joseph, poor Joseph, standing naked in the snow. He only had a rat to load his suitcases on. The rat wouldn't run into its hole, even when the lights came on. And the lights came on, the floodlights in the guard towers. What a powerful sort of poem, right? This feels very much to me like the trench poets. So if this is the sort of thing that you like, the trench poets would be a good place to start. It was an entire movement of poetry circled around the First World War. Very powerful stuff. Very much in the name of, hey, you have your sacred poetry. I know your sacred poetry. But that's not the real world. I'm going to take your poetry and rub it in the dirt. That's sort of what the trench poets were. That's sort of what the trench poets did. And that's what we're getting here from Charles Simic. I'm not 100% sure this is the only poem from him that I have ever read, so it is quite possible that I'm butchering his name, but I don't think so. I think it's at least close to what I'm saying. And though trench poetry circles around the First World War, I'm assuming this is Second World War poetry. I'm assuming this is about the Nazis. But that is not as important, the setting for the poem, as those things which are going on inside the poem. And briefly, it's important, I think, to talk about the title here, Begotten of the Spleen. So I am getting this from Literature, a Portable Anthology. It's a little too shiny there, my light's too bright, and everything's backwards, so deal with it. But this is a pretty good collection of literature. And it has little footnotes for us. So this tells us, spleen, once believed to be the source of a person either of high spirit, courage, and resolute mind, or of ill nature, ill humor, and irritable or peevish temper. So basically, begotten of the spleen is coming from that place which is making us really good or really bad. But spleen, I don't think, is the operative word in that title. I think it's begotten. Why? Because begotten is of probably the most well-known phrase from the New Testament. In fact, one of the phrases that separates the New Testament from the Old Testament, that makes the New Testament a completely different religion from the Old Testament, which causes the chasm between Judaism and Christianity. That phrase, "For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son." Why do I bring up the Bible? Well, because the poem brings up the Bible. So, with that poem happening, pointing back to the title, it is necessary that we understand what's going on there in the title. This is, I think, kicking dirt on the precious nature of God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son. How do I say that? The Virgin Mother walked barefoot among the landmines. She carried an old man in her arms like a howling babe. The first precious thing to the Christian religion is the Christ. The second, probably the Virgin Mother. Both of these things are necessary for that religion to stand on its own two legs. In the very first, 5, 9, probably 20 words of this poem, the first 20 words of this poem, we have all of those things being guffed up. This is a type of poetry that I'm a very large fan of, because it is not necessarily blasphemy, because it is so obvious so early in the poem that we're not talking about literal Jesus. We're not saying, you know what else happened in Jesus' life? This. No, we're using those things precious to our religion as metaphor. And here, what we're doing is these things are not metaphor for good things. This isn't saying, oh, my auntie Jacqueline was so good she was the Virgin Mary. No. It's saying there are very bad things in the world, despite what your religion may or may not be telling us, what your religion might not disclose to us, what your religion may or may not decide is worthy of inclusion in that book of yours. This poem casts many of the players of the Bible in roles which are, in everyone that it casts in an unflattering role. The one that stands out to me are the Magi. The ones that stand out to me are the Magi. Because what we're doing is we are setting Mary as this old woman running around between the landmines, and Jesus as the old man howling in her arms like a babe who has stumps now for legs. The obvious allusion is that his legs have been lost stepping on a landmine, right? The Magi stood around cleaning their nails with bayonets. What this does is it casts the wise men, the Magi. It casts these people who... So Jesus and Mother Mary, they're struggling. They are here in line with the Christian religion. Jesus and the Mother Mary, the two people who are cast in those roles, are the persecuted. In this poem, those people are still persecuted. The Magi, the people who are supposed to know better, well, they're the captors. They're the people standing around cleaning their nails with bayonets. They are the ones with bayonets. They're the ones with dirty hands. That is a smooth little thing to throw in there that I think Charles deserves some credit for. Those are the people with dirty hands, needing to clean their nails with the bayonets. This is a... This poem is this poem is in the trench poet fashion, a way of saying the world is not the narrative. The narrative is broken because people have come around and broken it. One more time. Begotten of the spleen. The Virgin Mother walked barefoot among the landmines. She carried an old man in her arms like a howling babe. The earth was an old people's home. Judas was the night nurse, emptying bedpans into the River Jordan, tying people on a dog chain. The old man had 2 stumps for legs. St. Peter came pushing a cart loaded with flying carpets. They were not flying carpets. They were piles of bloody diapers. The Magi stood around, cleaning their nails with bayonets. The old man gave little Mary Magdalene a broken piece of mirror. She hid in the church outhouse. When she got thirsty, she licked the steam off the glass. That leaves Joseph, poor Joseph, standing naked in the snow. He only had a rat to load his suitcases on. The rat wouldn't run into its hole. Even when the lights came on, and the lights came on, the floodlights in the guard towers. Yeah, I think that is a powerful poem. Should not be surprising. I believe Charles Simic, give me 1 second here. I believe Charles Simic was decorated as a poet, which would make sense if he's in an anthology like this. Charles Simic is a Serbian-American poet and former co-poetry editor of the Paris Review. He received the Pulitzer Prize for Poetry in 1990 for The World Doesn't End, and was a finalist of the Pulitzer Prize in 1986 for selected poems. So yeah, that is all I have for this poetry discussion. Again, a poetry discussion every day of the month, this month, and we're quickly approaching 100 poetry discussions here on the channel, so make sure you check out that playlist, because there are quite a few poems floating around the internet from this channel. I hope to see you next time on the next poetry discussion.